How's it going, people? Welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we're talking about depreciation, something that slaps pretty much everyone who buys a new car. But the people who front the most cash in terms of depreciation tend to be buying cars like supercars. So in this video, we're going to talk through 5 cars that have depreciated significantly since they were released, and also give you the reasons as to why I think they have dropped so much in value. They are ordered from least to most average annual depreciation because it makes life easier and less bias on my side. But don't forget that these are supercars, and so even though they've depreciated a ton, they're still pretty expensive overall, and they'll cost you a lot to run if you decided to buy one. And don't forget them in the UK, so prices in other countries may differ as well. Before we begin, make sure you hit the like button. If I hit 1,000 likes, I'll do even cheaper supercars. Subscribe as well if you're new, but without further ado, let's get into the video. Starting us off at number 5, we have a rogue one, but a bit of a prediction by me based on what's happened in the past. It's the Lamborghini Huracan, which has dropped in value by 34% total since its release in 2014, an average of 4.9% year on year. Adjusted for inflation, it was £175,000 when new, but you can now get one for around £115,000, and you'll find plenty under £125,000. It hosts a 5.2 litre V10 engine, putting out 601 brake horsepower, which takes from 0 to 60 in just 3.1 seconds, and it will get you to a top speed of 202 miles per hour, which is almost triple our speed limits here in the UK, unfortunately. As is convention with Lambos, it's named after a Spanish fighting bull renowned for its courage that fought all the way back in 1879, but it's also the Spanish word for hurricane. From a technical perspective, it has the first V10 engine to have ever been gifted with both direct fuel injection and multi-point fuel injection, which means that it has the power benefits of direct injection and the efficiency benefits of multi-point, depending on the circumstances. It's slightly toned down in terms of madness compared with its predecessors, and by that I mean it doesn't look like it's been heavily harassed by an axe to make it have loads of angles, which turned off a few potential buyers, but in general it has sold very well as an entry-level Lambo. However, the reason why I think this still has an opportunity to depreciate further in the future is that it took over from the Gallardo as the baby Lambo in their lineup, and the Gallardo saw some significant depreciation over its lifetime, becoming renowned as the Lambo you could own for free considering how stagnant its value has been for the past few years. 14,022 Gallardos were built over its 10-year run, yet within 5 years the same number of Huracans were produced, so it's not a rare car by Lamborghini standards. With such supply, the fact it's practically the same car in many ways as the much cheaper Audi R8 V10 Plus, which we'll get onto a bit later, means it can't really be argued as worth that much more money than the R8, other than for badge snobbery reasons. So just as I reckon the R8 will continue to depreciate, like we've seen with the first gen R8, the Huracan will too, like the Gallardo, always remaining slightly more expensive but not massively so. A key benefit of this car anyway is its reliability. According to Lamborghini experts, it's a relatively problem-free car thanks to that sweet Audi engineering. One thing to look out for though is on early 2015 models you may need to update the software, which can cost a bit, and general running and maintenance costs won't be cheap, but it's a Lambo, so what can you expect? Another Italian beast now is the Ferrari FF, which is an absolutely beautiful looking shooting brake style Grand Tourer with a supercar level of engine performance. Since its release into the market for the 2012 model year, it has dropped in value from £269,000 adjusted for inflation to £89,000 at the minimum now, with plenty of good examples available for under £100,000. That's a reduction of 67%, more than any other car on this list, but thanks to it being the oldest car too, it comes out an average of around 7.5% year on year average. That tells you how bad some of the other cars on this list will be for depreciation. Despite being the slowest car on this list with a still very respectable 0 to 60 time of 3.6 seconds, it has the largest engine, a 6.3 litre V12 which puts 650 brake horsepower down through its 4 wheels. It comes as the second most recent in a long line of Ferrari Grand Tourers at the time of making this video, and has received absolutely rave reviews from owners who have loved owning the car and even using it as a daily. Imagine a 6.3 litre V12 Ferrari as your daily, what a flex. One reason why I think it's one of the best looking Ferrari Grand Tourers is the fact that it was designed by Pininfarina, and is at least a match visually for the more recent GTC4 Lusso, which is also a great looking car. The interior is quintessentially Ferrari too, with all the right dashboard features and materials used throughout, so with such a great overall offering, why the depreciation? And considering all 4-seater Ferraris seem to lose so much value, why does anyone buy them new just to lose hundreds of thousands of pounds? I think the reason why they depreciate so much alongside other 4-seater Ferraris is their original prices being too high. The FF's adjusted list price of £269,000 back in 2012 is over 50 grand more than you would have spent for a 458 after inflation, at £212,000. Ultimately, a lot of Ferrari buyers are after the classic 2-seater supercar experience and not the 4-seater. Ferrari themselves notice a different market. People that buy brand new 4-seater Ferraris are generally exceptionally wealthy, to the point at which the depreciation doesn't matter, and there are even fewer people looking for slightly depreciated examples, meaning values tumble down to a point where people are actually willing to buy them. In comparison, the 458 owner bought it because they wanted a fast flash car, and someone else will buy it off them for the same reason. They don't want to spend the extra 50k to have a less fast and less flash car. That doesn't make any sense in their minds. These are generally well looked after cars though, so while upkeep will cost you, you're in good hands with Ferrari's service. However, do watch out for seeping from the oil pan and sticking buttons on the interior, which have been noted by a few owners. On to the top 3 now, and in third we have one of my personal favourites, which makes me pretty happy that it's dipping in price. It's the second generation Audi R8 V10 Plus, which has dropped from an adjusted price of £154,000 down to £72,000 the bare minimum, making it the cheapest car on this list, and there are plenty available for under £85,000 with very low mileage. That works out at around 9% depreciation per year on average, or around 53% in total since its release in 2015. This V10 Plus is in many ways the same basic car as the Huracan I mentioned previously, same engine, same platform, and hence exactly the same specs, with the same 0 to 60 time for good measure. While many people questioned whether the first generation R8 could be 100% considered a supercar, I think few will doubt the status of the second gen, particularly in plus spec. It's entirely designed to be exotic, with the only potential letdown being that the interior isn't as flashy as the Huracan that it twins, and is more in line with being a more premium Audi, which I quite like, but I get that people might think differently on this when buying a supercar. The car received a facelift in 2018 which slightly increased the power and made the design even more aggressive, with more angles making it look a little closer to the Huracan in terms of concept, but these facelifts are of course slightly more expensive second-hand still due to being newer. In terms of why it's depreciated so much, the key thing I'd go for is badge. It can't simply be performance or reliability, as it's practically the same car as the Huracan. It could theoretically be looks, but that's very subjective, and there are plenty of people that love the look of the R8, so it's therefore in my opinion to do with the badge and where it sits in the market. Audi already positioned the car as being much cheaper than the Huracan, meaning to some degree that the Huracan is more aspirational, and it's quite clear that Lamborghini are renowned for exotic cars, while Audi make anything and everything from first cars to family cars to supercars. This doesn't necessarily devalue the R8, it just maybe makes the Huracan more special in people's minds, hence it has depreciated less. On reliability, it's a similar story to the Huracan, and generally owners note these are reasonably solid supercars for increased levels of use, with some available with over 40,000 miles on the clock. Just wanted to remind you that if you're enjoying the video, make sure you hit the like button, I'd really appreciate it. Subscribe as well if you're new, and I'm trying to grow my Instagram following as I post over there every single day a whole bunch of car content and other interesting stuff, so if you want to get involved with that, at Cars with JB. And once you've done all that, let's get back to the video. Just missing out on the top spot, we have the highly capable Honda NSX, which has dropped in value from an adjusted £138,000 with no spec options to around £88,000 now, and you'll find plenty of low mileage examples under the £90,000 mark. That's a drop of around 36% in value, or 9% average annual depreciation. Not ideal for people that bought them new. However, this car has been generally very well regarded by owners, YouTubers and journalists alike, and some have gone as far as naming it a hypercar due to its performance. In fact, Chris Harris literally called it a cheap Porsche 918. I'll let you decide whether it's worthy of the hypercar title. I'll just stick to supercar for now to rustle fewer jimmies. Now this is a weird one in terms of its powertrain. It has a longitudinally mounted 3.5 litre twin turbocharged V6 engine in the midsection, as well as 2 electric motors up front and 1 electric motor at the rear, which altogether puts out 572 brake horsepower, less than any other car on this list. It's not slow though, with a 0 to 60 of 2.9 seconds. It will blitz the Ferrari, Lambo and R8 off the line. While the original NSX that ran from 1990 to 2005 was designed in collaboration with F1 legend Ayrton Senna, the second generation arrived more than 10 years later with a strong legacy to uphold, namely that the car had to perform on the same level as top supercars of the time for a fraction of the cost. Weirdly, they don't actually have the same name. The original NSX was called the New Sports Car Experimental, and the new NSX is called the New Sports Experience, and for my American audience, you won't even know it as a Honda, it will be an Acura to you. The car's design is pretty special too, as it's rare that you find a supercar with a female designer. Michelle Christensen from the US Acura team led the design process. It is, in my opinion, a stunning looking car externally, but I have to say the interior lets it down for me. Having been in one, the interior isn't even on a level with the Civic Type R. It looks more like your average everyday Honda SUV in there, just with some sportier seats, and lots of the plastic looks and feels quite cheap. This, in part, is probably why it's depreciated so much, but there are two other factors. The first, like the Audi, is the badge, as you're buying a car from a company that literally makes cars like the Jazz. It's a shame because if the car had a more prestigious badge, I do believe it would have held value much more. This has been reflected with generally pretty poor sales figures worldwide. The second factor is the other badge on the car, NSX. With the history and respect the first car has, the second has a long way to go to gain that level of respect, even if it is very capable. I reckon this car will be a slow burn. It will continue to lose value just like the original did, and then one day flip around and go the other way, with such a limited number of them due to lack of sales. On release there were a bunch of recalls, but ultimately this car has been trouble free for a lot of owners, with many racking up the mileages. Owners note that if you have one, click it into Sport Plus mode for the last 20 minutes of a long journey to charge the batteries, but other than that it seems okay. It couldn't really be any other brand on the top spot, could it? Of course it's McLaren with the 720S, which has dropped in value from £231,000 adjusted for inflation in 2017 to £129,000 now, with many available for under £135,000. Though it's the most expensive car on this list then, it's dropped by 44% in value in just 4 years, or 11% on average yearly, which is absolute madness for the wallets of people who bought them new and held onto them. It has an evolution of the engine you find in most McLarens, a 4-litre twin-turbocharged V8 tuned to 709 brake horsepower, which takes it to 60 in an NSX beating time of 2.8 seconds, despite being rear-wheel drive, while every other car on this list has the benefits of all-wheel drive. This is one of my personal favourite looking McLarens, and it benefited from being built almost entirely new when compared with the 650S that followed on from the 12C. It's got a huge range of features to help it to perform well, like the proactive chassis control, which manages the suspension to provide the best stability, and a carbon fibre F1 inspired tub, the same that you'll find on the Senna, Speedtail and Elva. To make sure it's considered a supercar, it also has dihedral doors to hark back to the McLaren F1, as well as for flexing and access purposes. It also has a race-inspired interior with carbon fibre and Alcantara throughout, so this is properly in supercar territory. Then why has it depreciated so massively? Well, there's a whole bunch of reasons why these McLarens drop in price, and I've discussed the majority of these in depth in a previous video specifically on this subject, but simply put, there are 4 main problems: history, brand strength, service and company strategy. In terms of history, they're lacking. Yes, they have the F1 team, but on the road we haven't seen any real cars other than the F1, a couple of collabs, and then the absolute melee of cars that have been released since the 12C's release in 2011. That means no one can really tell whether these cars will have any good long-term values like Ferraris tend to, for example. The link to the history is therefore the brand strength. Where Ferrari and Lamborghini have created many good and bad cars over many years, their brands have cemented themselves, while McLaren have still yet to fully define where they are in the market. On top of this, they have come under significant fire for poor or entirely unacceptable servicing and after sales for customers, which frightens people away from buying them second hand. This is probably the key one, as electrical issue horror stories are all over forums, as well as build quality failures and Senna's catching fire, which has just crushed their brand strength and reputation for many people. The final nail in the coffin, which drops this car into 6 feet of depreciation, is company strategy, with their bullish plan of producing an insane amount of cars year on year with a startup style mindset. If you bought a 720S in 2017, it was already out of date by 2018 in McLaren standards. As I said, I went in depth on this in a previous video, so I recommend you go and check that out. But that brings us to the end of the video. I hope you've enjoyed it. Thank you very much to you guys for watching, and a huge thank you as well to the patrons for their support. Remember to like, comment, subscribe, all that great stuff, and I'll see you in the next one.